Draft Day. Chris Brown, Steve Tasker with you, and joined now by NFL player analyst for CBS Sports, our good friend Chris Trapasso joining us here on Draft Day as Buffalo holds 10 selections, the first of which is pick 30 tonight. And Chris, what do you just kind of hole up in your man cave to watch this thing take place tonight? What are you going to be doing? Where are you going to be sitting?
So actually last year I set up this situation or the station in my TV room where I'm on my couch. I have my laptop. I have a standing desk that has another monitor. And then I like to watch it old school and like see the picks as they happen on TV. So technically 3 screens. I'll get up every 30 minutes or so to stretch, get some water, because I know it's certainly a marathon from Thursday night all the way through Saturday.
How many picks do you think does your gut tell you the Bills make? It's going to be less than 10, more than 10?
I think less than 10. I think between 7 and 8. I think that doesn't mean that I don't think that it's impossible that they trade out of this first selection at pick 30. We heard Brandon Beane say that they don't have 30 first-round grades, which isn't shocking. But I think they will be aggressive at certain points of the draft. We saw them, in 22, they traded up in the 5th round. They loved Khalil Shakir, and that ultimately paid off. They've traded up later, for Dawson Knox in 2019. So even though I don't think that they're dead set on trading up at 30, although they could do that if one of their last first-round grades is still available, maybe in the 20s. But I think, yes, less than 10 picks from the Bills. There's certainly jobs open on the defensive side, but I don't know if there's 10 overall jobs available on this Bills roster.
I've said, too, that Brandon Beane is no stranger to moving around in the first round. I thought I was floating this out there to Brownie, and my adrenaline might be taking over, but I think they made trade down twice like they did last year and then trade back up again and try and, just either accumulate some picks for next year to do the same thing again, just to have more weapons and more, the more assets. We may see them move multiple times like we did last year before they even make a pick.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Brandon Beane trade. I think I did the research last night 17 times, whether it's up or down, since he's become the Bills GM. So he is no stranger to doing that. And when you're looking at the position groups that the Bills probably need, defensive tackle, corner, and then you could maybe say wide receiver and safety, the sweet spot at almost all of those positions after the blue chippers at the top that are probably going to be well off the board by the time the Bills go on the clock at 30, the sweet spot is the second day of the draft. So I think it would be smart for the Bills and a lot of these other Super Bowl contenders to not be so apt to pick someone at the back end of the first that they have a second-round grade on, but accumulate, like you're mentioning, Steve, a lot of those day 2 selections. Those are really valuable in this draft.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of wondering, because and we've had callers say as much as well, that it'd be nice if the Bills had 4 picks in the top 100, not just 3. And there's certainly multiple avenues that Brandon Beane can travel to accomplish that. I was of the feeling like, hey, you've got all this day 3 capital, use all of that to get a pick in the 3rd round, to get 4 in the top 100. But with all the chatter we're hearing about quarterback-needy teams maybe using their high 2 to get back into the bottom of round 1 tonight, I'm wondering if that's the easier way to go. Just move out at 30, move back into round 2, have 3 picks in round 2, and probably pick up a 3rd, depending on how far back you move. That might be the easier way to get a 3.
Exactly, and I think the low-hanging fruit here for a potential trade partner would be Joe Shane, that Brandon Beane knows very well from his time in Buffalo, the GM of the Giants, that if they don't pick Shedeur Sanders at 3, and as of right now, like 5 or 6 hours before the draft, doesn't seem like they're going to ultimately pick him there. I think you would have to assume that Beane and Shane have at least some trade parameters set up just in case, whether it's Shedeur Sanders or Jackson Dart, or there's a wild card, a Tyler Shuck or a Jalen Milroe. I totally agree with you, Chris. I think trading back, getting 3 second-rounders and that coveted 3rd-round pick would be a boon for this Bills roster on this weekend of the draft.
So we've been talking as well. We always talk about trading draft picks and positions in the draft and draft value trade charts. There's also rosters of players in the NFL that are also kind of up for grabs to get traded. We talked about Kirk Cousins being kind of a catalyst for Atlanta. Like if some team, like if the Steelers wanted to go get Kirk Cousins instead of waiting on Aaron Rodgers, and feeling that his injuries last year were the problems that he had in Atlanta. Or if Jalen Ramsey down in Miami, they want to move on from him. He's on the trade block. Their teams, players like this. And I was going to ask you, do you have any, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but are there players out there like Cousins, like Jalen Ramsey, who you could see being a part of a package for any team, or any team who might want to do that? Like certainly Minnesota with 4 picks would love some more capital.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more intrigue on that veteran trade market during the draft than we've seen over the past few drafts. I think famously in 2022, when the Eagles traded while they were on the clock, they traded to acquire A.J. Brown, and that obviously was huge for them. I think a few other names, and it's good that you pointed this out because I think there are more of those veterans, like I said, than in the past few years. Mark Andrews, the tight end from the Baltimore Ravens, and then maybe this could be something that the Bills could explore. Trey Hendrickson. I know they signed Joey Bosa, obviously Michael Hoyt, who's suspended for the first 6 games. Trey Hendrickson is the lone Cincinnati Bengals veteran that was due a new contract that didn't get it from that organization. So don't be surprised if we see more of those players floated for trade ideas. And then when teams miss on a specific position, say in round 1 or early in round 2, it wouldn't be shocking if we start to see those trades really ramp up. And I would be surprised if there are not any veterans who are actually shipped during draft weekend.
Okay. Let's think about round 1 tonight in terms of what we feel the headlines will be coming out. Obviously, there'll be quarterback headlines. Those happen every year. But I'm of the belief that defensive linemen are going to dominate this round tonight. How many edge and how many DTs could you foresee coming off the board? Go a position at a time there.
Sure, I could see 10 total, and that seems like a very high number to have almost a third of the first round at just 2 positions. But you have Derek Harmon, you have Walter Nolan, you have Kenneth Grant, you have Mason Graham. That's already 4 defensive tackles. The edge rushers, Mykel Williams. I mean, this is in no particular order. Mykel Williams, Donovan Izaraku, Shamar Stewart, Abdul Carter, James Pierce, Mike Green. It wouldn't even be crazy if there's more than 10. And I agree with you, Chris. This will be the biggest headliner, maybe not a traditional headliner that you're right. It's usually quarterback and wide receiver, the fantasy positions, but this has long been billed as a really good edge rusher and defensive tackle class. A lot of these players that ultimately worked out at the combine or at their pro days tested very well, which I think should be music to the ears of the Bills because those are 2 positions that they certainly need to add to this roster.
What do you think? Do you go edge first or do you go defensive lineman first? Because they pick at 30, and then it's a long time to 56. What do you think they do? Do they go edge or do they go interior if they're going to pick a defensive lineman? Edge or interior?
I think they would probably want to go interior defensive line, and that's probably a pretty consensus opinion. But it wouldn't shock me, again, to quote what Brandon Beane said just a few days ago at his pre-draft press conference, that they do not have 30 first-round grades. And I think he kind of said that tongue-in-cheek as though they never have anywhere close to 30 first-round grades on their board. They could go edge if it's just the best player available. If they love James Pierce, if they love Mike Green from Marshall, and they weren't envisioning that player ultimately being there, I think they would say, you know what? We love the depth at defensive tackle. We love the depth at corner. Let's just pick the best player available for this team. Presumably will be on the defensive side. I don't think wide receiver is a 0% chance to ultimately be the pick, but in general, I think the signings of Trey White and Dane Jackson give the Bills more flexibility as to what position they address in this first round as, say, compared to 2022, when I think they felt a little backed into the corner to go with that position at cornerback, and they ultimately picked Kyer Elam.
All right, this pre-draft run-up, Chris, we have seen the greatest number of players refuse to test than I have seen maybe ever. No 40 time, skipping out on a number of other tests. It used to be people skipped the bench press. It was a big deal. Mm-hmm. Then everybody started doing that. Now you had a cavalcade of players, top prospects, like not testing at all. Marvin Harrison did it famously last year, or chose not to do it famously last year, but he almost seemed like a lone wolf. Now you've got packs of players not testing. Some probably because they haven't had a chance to properly train for the 40, for example, because of an injury. But But you've got first-round picks tonight that did not test. Will Johnson, Ashton Genty. And then you have players that could be on Buffalo's radar, like a Benjamin Morrison, who finally gets on a field on Monday out in Arizona at his high school, but then ultimately decides, I'm not running a 40. How curious are you to see how much players get dinged by NFL clubs for not testing?
I think that's a great question, and it's good to bring that up because for as much as teams will say, look, we have on-field data now, we don't really care about the 40 and the 3-cone. The only reason why that's still really valuable is because you can compare those across 20 or 30 years in terms of looking back at specific prospects. You know that the ultimate success rate for those players in the past. To not have those numbers, it makes it a little bit more cloudy into what is a very inexact science. So I think that is leading to a lot of the run-up to this draft centering around how enigmatic this class is and that there's players that could go in the top 10 or they could be one of the first picks in the second round. You look at what Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter, all the big insiders have said that this is like the most mysterious first round that we've had in a very long time. And I completely agree with that. I think there is a wide range of evaluations across the league and a lot of those players choosing not to work out. We don't have those quantifiable numbers. I think that's factoring into it.
How many, because I know teams tend to keep them in-house, are you aware of a number of players or any players that have red flags for medical or for off-the-field issues? Because there are some teams who will automatically pluck a player off their board. Other teams are like, move him up on their board or whatever. They don't dock players for off-the-field issues. What do you know about this year's class as a whole as to whether there are off-the-field issues, maybe with some high draft picks or some guys that may be in the Bills' radar?
All right, Steve, I wish I could give you a very concrete answer, but it's impossible to know what's a smokescreen, what's not. But I can run through some of the players that have at least perceived red flags. James Pierce from Tennessee, the concerns with him is that he's kind of the guy that's sitting by himself on the Tennessee sideline, maybe not super well liked by his teammates, didn't really participate in the Tennessee workout program, but didn't face any suspension, any discipline from the NCAA. So there's that. Mike Green, kind of the same thing at Marshall, that he was kind of a lone wolf and that might rub teams the wrong way. Walter Nolan, these are all players that are potential Bills first-round picks. Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss, was a big recruit. There was some thoughts that he was really entitled, and that could ultimately lead to a slide for him. The injury red flags, Chris pointed out, Benjamin Morrison, we barely got to see work out. Will Johnson, another big-time corner in this class, who was a big recruit and played at Michigan, played well from his freshman season on. We got to see him a few weeks ago work out, but he didn't run the 40-yard dash like Chris pointed out. And then Savon Revel from East Carolina tore his ACL in September, ultimately never got a workout from him. And that really adds a lot of murkiness to the back half of round one at the cornerback position and the defensive tackle spot, even the edge rusher position. So some of these players I think will ultimately just go where we expect them to go, somewhere in the middle of the first round. But if some of those names are still available when the Bills go on the clock or aren't picked until Friday, I think those character or injury concerns will be a big reason why.
Okay, majority of Buffalo's draft capital currently lies on day 3. Give me your sneaky Bills positional need that most are not thinking of. Mine was tight end because Quentin Morris is not here. I think that could be a consideration late. Do you have another?
I would say safety, although, I mean, if Nick Manwari from South Carolina or if Malachi Starks is sitting there either at 30 or close to 30, I don't think anyone would be shocked if the Bills make safety their first-round selection. But if you're looking at just the roster, I think we can all agree it's not the biggest need just in terms of the bodies and the players that they are returning at that position after re-signing DeMar Hamlin, having Cole Bishop, their second-round pick last year, entering year 2. I think Jordan Hancock is a name from Ohio State who reminds me a lot of Jahdae Barron, who's going to be probably a top 20 selection. Played corner, played on the outside, inside, played safety, big-time tester at the Ohio State Pro Day. We know the Bills were there. We watched all embedded last night when it came out that Terrence Gray was there in attendance. So I think safety and tight end, that's a really good one too for day 3. Don't be surprised if the Bills ultimately address both of those positions on the third day of the draft.
All right, Chris, strap
Good
in.
stuff.
It's going to be a long 3 days. Enjoy it,
Oh,
man.
it will be.
Good seeing
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Chris.
Appreciate
Thanks for coming
it.
on. Appreciate
Yep.
you.
Thanks, guys.